The Grand Plaza Hotel ballroom fell silent. Eleanor Miller sat in her wheelchair, watching as her husband Victor wrapped his arm around his pregnant mistress in front of 200 stunned guests. "I'd like to introduce you all to Olivia," Victor announced proudly. "Not just as our company's new creative director, but as the mother of my child and the future I've always dreamed of." Cameras flashed as Victor looked directly at Eleanor, his disabled wife of 12 years, with something between pity and disdain. "Sometimes life gives us a second chance at happiness," he continued, raising his champagne glass. But as tears welled in Eleanor's eyes, something unexpected happened. She smiled, and that smile sent a chill down Victor's spine. "Before we dive into the story, let us know where you're watching from." 3 years earlier, Eleanor and Victor Miller were the golden couple of the architectural world. Their modern glass home overlooking the city perfectly reflected their success. He, the charismatic businessman who made deals happen. She, the brilliant architect whose designs won awards and changed skylines. They complemented each other perfectly, recalled Diana, Eleanor's former colleague. Victor knew how to sell Eleanor's vision, and Eleanor knew how to make Victor's promises reality. But everything changed on a rainy Tuesday in November. The accident at the Riverside development should have been impossible. Safety protocols were Eleanor's obsession, yet somehow a temporary platform collapsed while she was inspecting the 14th floor of their newest project. "The fall shattered her spine," explained Dr. Rosario, the neurologist who treated Eleanor. "We initially weren't sure if she would walk again. After 3 surgeries and months of painful rehabilitation, Eleanor could manage short distances with walking aids, but remained dependent on a wheelchair for daily life. Her once busy schedule of site visits and design meetings shrank to physical therapy appointments and doctor visits. And Victor, the man who had vowed to stand by her side in sickness and in health, began a subtle but unmistakable withdrawal. To the outside world, Victor Miller remained the devoted husband. He hired the best specialists, renovated their home for accessibility, and spoke movingly at charity galas about their journey. "My wife has shown incredible courage," he would say, his hand resting protectively on Eleanor's shoulder. "Her resilience inspires me every day." But behind closed doors, a different reality was emerging, one of cold silences, missed dinners, and growing resentment. The Berkeley Foundation's annual fundraiser was in full swing, crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over San Francisco's elite. Eleanor Miller sat near the edge of the grand ballroom, her wheelchair positioned at a table partially hidden behind a large floral arrangement. From her vantage point, she could observe her husband Victor commanding the room. At 42, he remained strikingly handsome, his salt and pepper hair and tailored tuxedo giving him the distinguished air of success. He moved effortlessly between groups, each laugh and handshake cementing business relationships worth millions. "He certainly knows how to work a room," remarked an older woman who had joined Eleanor at her table. "Your husband has the mayor eating out of his hand." Eleanor smiled politely. Victor's always been good with people. What she didn't say was how she had begun measuring the distance between them, not just the physical space across the ballroom, but the growing emotional chasm that had opened since her accident. They had met 15 years earlier at Cornell University's architecture program. Eleanor Chen, the serious student from a family of engineers, and Victor Miller, the charismatic scholarship student with big dreams and even bigger ambition. "He asked me to review his project," Eleanor later told her sister Elise. "It was terrible, all flash, no function. I told him his beautiful tower would collapse in the first strong wind." Instead of being offended, Victor had laughed and asked her to dinner. "Teach me," he'd said. "I want to learn from the best." Their romance bloomed quickly. Victor's charm balanced Eleanor's intensity. Her precision complemented his vision. By graduation, they were partners in every sense, launching Miller Plus Chen Sustainable Design with nothing but student loans and determination. Their early projects were small, a restaurant renovation, an eco-friendly dental office, but their reputation grew steadily. Eleanor's innovative designs prioritized sustainability and accessibility long before they became industry buzzwords. Victor secured the clients and financing, his natural charisma opening doors that remained closed to many young architects. The watershed moment came 8 years ago, winning the commission for the Canopy, a mixed-use development that transformed an abandoned industrial site into an award-winning green community. "The Canopy put us on the map," Victor often said in interviews. "That's when I knew we were going to change the world." Success brought wealth, recognition, and increasingly ambitious projects. The small firm expanded, becoming Miller Development Group, the name change a subtle shift that Eleanor had initially resisted, but eventually accepted as good business. Their personal life seemed equally charmed. Weekends at their cabin in Sonoma, vacations exploring architectural wonders across Europe and Asia. Plans for children, postponed repeatedly for just one more big project until those conversations gradually faded. At the gala, Eleanor checked her watch. It was nearly 10, and Victor had barely acknowledged her since their arrival. She watched as he chatted animatedly with Jessica Lang, the city planning commissioner whose approval they needed for their newest development. Eleanor's phone buzzed with a text from Martina. "Don't forget your 10 p.m. medication. How's the gala? Surviving the small talk?" Eleanor smiled, grateful for her physical therapist's concern. Martina was one of the few bright spots in her post-accident life. Tough during their sessions, but unfailingly supportive beyond them. Watching Victor work his magic, she typed back, "I'm practically invisible." "Their loss," Martina replied immediately. "Want me to come kidnap you? I make a very convincing medical emergency." Eleanor chuckled, drawing a curious glance from her table-mate. "Tomorrow's session still at 2? She texted back. "Yes, and wear comfortable clothes. We're trying something new." Eleanor was about to respond when she noticed Victor approaching with Commissioner Lang. "And here's the creative genius behind our accessibility initiatives," Victor announced warmly, his hand settling on Eleanor's shoulder with practiced affection. "My wife insists every Miller project must be accessible to everyone." Eleanor forced a smile. "It's just good design. Buildings should work for all people." "So admirable," the commissioner gushed. "Victor was just telling me about your accident. Such a tragedy for someone so talented." Eleanor maintained her smile even as she registered Victor's narrative at work, casting her as the inspiring tragedy, her career spoken of in the past tense. "I still consult on all our projects," Eleanor said firmly. "In fact, I've been working on some modifications to the Westridge proposal that I'd love to discuss with your office." The commissioner looked momentarily confused, glancing at Victor, who smoothly interjected, "Eleanor likes to keep her hand in things when her health permits. Now, Jessica, about that height variance." And just like that, Eleanor was sidelined from her own project. She watched as Victor guided the commissioner away, already deep in technical discussions that once would have been Eleanor's domain. Later that night, as their driver helped Eleanor into their modified SUV, Victor checked his phone, his face illuminated by the screen's glow. "Draymond wants to meet for breakfast before the board presentation," he said, not looking up. "I'll have Agnes bring your breakfast tray in the morning." "I could come to the presentation," Eleanor suggested. "It is our company." Victor's smile was thin. "It's just financials. Terribly boring. Better you rest for your therapy session." At home, their modern mansion had been retrofitted with ramps and elevators after Eleanor's accident. What was once their showpiece of architectural innovation now felt to Eleanor like an elaborate cage. Victor helped her into the elevator with practiced efficiency, supportive but distant, like a nurse with a patient. In their bedroom, he laid out her nightgown and medication while she wheeled herself into their accessible bathroom. Staring at her reflection, Eleanor noted the changes 3 years had wrought. Still beautiful at 39, but her face had thinned, dark circles, permanent fixtures under her eyes. Her once athletic body, now altered by both injury and inactivity, felt like a stranger's. When she emerged, Victor was already in bed, scrolling through his phone. "Martinelli confirmed the investment," he mentioned without looking up. $30 million for the Parkside development. "That's wonderful," Eleanor said, struggling slightly as she transferred from her wheelchair to the bed. Victor didn't move to help, something that once would have shocked her but now felt routine. "I'll be heading to Chicago next weekend to finalize details," he continued. "Just 2 nights." Eleanor nodded, noting another business trip added to Victor's increasingly busy travel schedule. "The Chicago team could come here," she suggested. "Or I could come with you. I haven't traveled in months." Victor finally looked up from his phone, his expression a mixture of impatience and pity. "Eleanor, be realistic. The logistics of traveling with your situation, it's complicated. The team needs my undivided attention." The words stung, but Eleanor had grown accustomed to such subtle dismissals. "Of course," she said quietly. "It makes sense." Victor reached over and patted her hand, a gesture that felt more patronizing than affectionate. "That's my practical girl. Now take your medication. You know how you struggle to sleep without it." Eleanor obediently swallowed the pills Victor handed her, wondering when she had become someone who accepted these small humiliations without protest. As Victor turned off his light and settled into sleep, Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Their bedroom, like their marriage, had been redesigned after her accident. Her adjustable hospital-grade bed positioned for accessibility, separated from Victor's premium mattress by a discreet but unbridgeable gap. The next morning, Eleanor woke to an empty house. Victor had left early for his meeting with Draymond, leaving a handwritten note propped against the coffee pot. "Breakfast in fridge. Agnes comes at 10. Remember your pills." Eleanor crumpled the note, irritated by its presumptive tone. She made her own coffee, stronger than the weak brew Agnes prepared, and wheeled herself to Victor's home office. Since her accident, Eleanor had gradually been excluded from the daily operations of their company. Her architect's license remained active, but her designs were increasingly modified by the firm's growing team, with Victor's approval. She scanned Victor's immaculate desk, looking for the Westridge proposal she'd mentioned to Commissioner Lang. Nothing. The computer was password protected, and Eleanor realized with a jolt that she no longer knew Victor's password, something that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. She was about to leave when her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I'm sorry, but you deserve to know the truth about your husband." Eleanor stared at the message, her heart racing. Attached was a photo that would change everything. Victor, his arm wrapped intimately around a beautiful younger woman with a visibly pregnant belly, exiting what appeared to be a private medical clinic. The timestamp showed yesterday afternoon, when Victor had claimed to be in meetings preparing for the board presentation. The photograph burned in Eleanor's mind as she waited for Victor to return home. The pregnant woman's face was unfamiliar, but the look of tenderness on Victor's face was one Eleanor hadn't seen directed at her in years. When Victor finally arrived that evening, Eleanor had composed herself, the phone with the damning photograph tucked into her wheelchair pocket. "How was the board presentation?" she asked casually as he loosened his tie. "Successful. We secured the funding for the Westridge expansion." Victor poured himself a scotch, not offering Eleanor one as he once would have. "How was therapy?" "Enlightening," Eleanor replied. "Victor, who is Olivia?" The question hung in the air. Victor's hand paused mid-sip, the only indication that the name meant anything to him. "Olivia Rhodes," he said smoothly after a beat. "Our new project manager for Westridge. Why do you ask?" Eleanor held his gaze. "Is there something you want to tell me about your relationship with her?" Victor set down his glass with careful precision. "She's a talented professional I'm mentoring." "Eleanor, what is this about?" Without a word, Eleanor took out her phone and showed him the photograph. Victor's expression hardened, but he didn't appear particularly shocked. "You're having me followed now?" His voice was cold. "Someone sent this to me. I don't know who." Victor's laugh was humorless. "And you immediately jumped to the worst conclusion. That's your problem, Eleanor. You've become so bitter." "She's pregnant, Victor." "Yes, she is. And her husband is very excited about it." Victor's lie was delivered with practiced conviction. "I was accompanying her to her appointment because she felt faint at the office. As her mentor, I was concerned." Eleanor wanted to believe him. Part of her, the part that remembered the man who had once adored her, desperately needed his explanation to be true. "Her husband," Eleanor repeated quietly. "Greg Rhodes. Works for Goldman. You met him at the Christmas party." Victor's details were specific, convincing. "Is that really what you think of me, Eleanor? That I would be carrying on with a married pregnant woman?" Put that way, it sounded absurd. Eleanor felt doubt creeping in. "The person who sent this suggested." "Who sent it?" Victor interrupted, suddenly alert. "Sounds like someone trying to cause trouble, probably jealous of our success." When Eleanor admitted she didn't know, Victor nodded knowingly. "Anonymous accusations aren't worth your energy. Now I need to review some contracts before dinner." As Victor left the room, Eleanor felt a familiar disorientation, the sensation that perhaps she was the unreasonable one, seeing problems where none existed. It was a feeling that had grown increasingly common since her accident, but something about Victor's too-perfect explanation nagged at her. That night, she lay awake long after Victor had fallen asleep, her mind returning to small inconsistencies in his behavior over recent months. The next morning, Eleanor made a decision. If Victor was telling the truth, nothing to worry about. But if he wasn't, "Agnes," she called to their housekeeper, "I'd like to do some online shopping this afternoon. Could you help me set up my laptop in Victor's office? The light is better there." Once alone in Victor's office, Eleanor moved quickly. First, she positioned a small wireless camera she had ordered weeks ago for security purposes, hiding it among the books on Victor's shelf. Then she began searching through his desk drawers. Most contained ordinary business documents, but in the back of the bottom drawer, she found a small key she didn't recognize. Pocketing it, she continued her search until Agnes called her for lunch. Over the next week, Eleanor established a new routine. Each day while Victor was at work, she reviewed the footage from the hidden camera, searching for anything unusual. Most evenings, Victor spent a few hours in his office, reviewing documents or making calls. Nothing suspicious. Then came Tuesday night. Victor entered his office at his usual time but locked the door, something he rarely did. Eleanor watched the live feed on her tablet as he made a call, his voice too low to hear clearly. But his expression was unmistakably intimate, his smile private. After the call, Victor unlocked his desk with the small key Eleanor had discovered, the same drawer that had appeared empty during her search. He removed what looked like a small black book and made several notes before returning it and relocking the drawer. The next day, while Victor was at a construction site, Eleanor used the key she had found. The black book was a separate ledger, documenting transfers to offshore accounts not mentioned in any of their joint financial statements. Large sums, hundreds of thousands of dollars, moving to numbered accounts in the Cayman Islands. More disturbing were the notes in the margins. "O apartment deposit. O car. O medical. O Olivia." Eleanor photographed every page before returning the book exactly as she had found it. That same afternoon, she called Diana, her former colleague from their early days at Miller Plus Chen. "Eleanor, it's been ages." Diana sounded genuinely pleased to hear from her. "How are you doing?" "Managing," Eleanor replied. "Diana, I need to ask you something confidentially. Do you know anything about a project manager named Olivia Rhodes?" A pause. "Olivia? Young, stunning, always dressed impeccably, about 30. "That sounds right. She's been at Miller for about a year now. Rising star." Diana hesitated. "Eleanor, there's been talk." "About?" "Victor seems particularly invested in her career. Late meetings, private lunches. The office gossip machine works overtime whenever together." Diana sighed. "I didn't want to say anything without evidence. After everything you've been through." Eleanor's suspicions crystallized into certainty. "Thank you for being honest. One more thing. Is she married? To someone named Greg Rhodes?" Diana's laugh confirmed what Eleanor already knew. "Olivia? No, she's definitely single. Makes a point of mentioning it, actually." After ending the call, Eleanor felt a strange calm descend. The pain of confirmation was mixed with validation. She wasn't imagining things or being paranoid. That evening, she watched Victor more carefully, noting how he checked his phone whenever it buzzed, the slight smile when reading certain messages. After dinner, he announced another business trip for the following week. 3 days in Seattle for the McKinley project, he said casually. "How interesting," Eleanor replied, keeping her voice neutral. "I thought the McKinley presentation wasn't until next month." Victor barely hesitated. "They moved up the timeline. These developers are always impatient." Another lie. Eleanor had seen an email on Victor's computer screen just that morning, confirming the McKinley presentation for its original date. After Victor retired to his office, Eleanor wheeled herself to the guest room and opened her laptop. It was time to be methodical. She created a secure document and began listing everything she knew for certain. Victor was lying about Olivia's marital status. He was transferring large sums of money to undisclosed accounts. Some of these funds appeared to be supporting Olivia. He was lying about his travel schedule. She needed more evidence, but her instincts told her this was just the beginning. The Victor she had married would never have betrayed her this way. When had he changed? Or had he always been capable of this deception, and she had simply been too in love to see it? The next morning, Eleanor called Martina, her physical therapist. "I need a favor," she said without preamble. "Something outside your professional duties." "I'm intrigued," Martina replied, "and concerned." Eleanor hesitated, then decided complete honesty was necessary. "I need you to help me follow my husband. I believe he's having an affair." Silence. "Then, I'll pick you up at 7. Something dark." That night, Martina drove them to an upscale restaurant in her modest Honda, parking where they could see the entrance. Sure enough, at 8:15, Victor arrived, not in his usual Tesla but in an Uber. 10 minutes later, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up, and Olivia emerged, her pregnancy now unmistakable even beneath her elegant coat. Eleanor watched through binoculars as Victor greeted Olivia with a kiss that was decidedly not mentorship, his hand lingering on her pregnant belly with obvious pride. "I've seen enough," Eleanor said quietly. Martina squeezed her hand. "What now?" "Now I find out how deep this goes." Over the next 2 weeks, Eleanor built her case methodically. She discovered credit card statements showing jewelry purchases from Tiffany that she had never received. She found reservations for a weekend getaway in Napa during Victor's supposed Seattle trip. Most disturbingly, she uncovered documents for a luxury penthouse purchased in Victor's name alone, not listed among their marital assets. The property was in the Archer, their newest residential tower still under construction. Then came the most painful discovery of all. While searching Victor's home office for more financial records, Eleanor found a small velvet box hidden beneath false bottom of his desk drawer. Inside was not jewelry, but a sonogram image labeled Baby Miller, 24 weeks, with Olivia's name clearly printed at the top. Eleanor was staring at the image, tears blurring her vision, when she heard Victor's voice behind her. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She turned to find him in the doorway, his expression a combination of rage and panic. "Finding the truth," she replied, holding up the sonogram. "Your mentee is carrying your child." Victor's face hardened. "You had no right to go through my things." No, right? Eleanor's voice rose. I'm your wife. That sonogram should have been our baby. This is exactly why I kept it from you, Victor snapped. Look at you. Emotional, hysterical. You're not stable enough to handle the truth. Not stable? Eleanor was incredulous. You're having an affair? Moving money offshore? Buying property I know nothing about? And I'm not stable? Victor stepped closer, his voice lowering to a dangerous calm. Eleanor, you haven't been well since the accident. The doctors warned me about potential psychological effects from your trauma and medications, paranoia, delusions of persecution. Don't you dare, Eleanor whispered. Don't you dare try to make my mental health. But Victor continued, his tone shifting to concern so convincing it was almost believable. I've been worried about you for months. These conspiracy theories, the hidden cameras, yes, I found it, he added, seeing her surprise. Eleanor, you need help. What I need is a divorce lawyer, she replied. Something flashed in Victor's eyes. Calculation, not pain, if that's what you think is best. But I should warn you, any judge will take your mental state into consideration when dividing assets, especially given how unpredictable you've been since the accident. The threat was implicit but clear. Challenge me, and I'll make you look unstable. But Victor continued, his tone shifting to concern so convincing it was almost believable. I've been worried about you for months. These conspiracy theories, the hidden cameras, yes, I found it, he added, seeing her surprise. Eleanor, you need help. What I need is a divorce lawyer, she replied. Something flashed in Victor's eyes. Calculation, not pain. If that's what you think is best. But I should warn you, any judge will take your mental state into consideration when dividing assets, especially given how unpredictable you've been since the accident. The threat was implicit but clear. Challenge me, and I'll make you look unstable. After Victor left, Eleanor sat shaking in her wheelchair, the sonogram still clutched in her hand. She had expected anger, perhaps even relief at being discovered. But this calculated gaslighting was something far more sinister. That night, Eleanor overheard Victor on the phone in his office, the door not quite closed. She found the sonogram, he was saying quietly. No, don't worry. I've been documenting her erratic behavior for months. My lawyer says we have options. Yes, a psychological evaluation would be the first step. Of course, I'll make sure you and the baby are taken care of. Eleanor wheeled herself silently back to her room, cold realization washing over her. Victor wasn't just planning to leave her. He was laying groundwork to potentially have her declared mentally incompetent. The implications were staggering. Control of her medical decisions, her finances, her very freedom. For the first time since discovering Victor's betrayal, genuine fear gripped her. This was no longer just about infidelity. It was about survival. The next morning, Eleanor woke with a clear head and a decision. If Victor wanted war, she would need to be strategic about her response. Acting emotionally would only play into his narrative about her mental instability. She began with her medications. For months, she had accepted without question the pills Victor provided each morning and evening, a combination of pain management, muscle relax, and sleep aids prescribed by various specialists. Martina, she asked during their next therapy session, would you look at something for me? She showed Martina the collection of pill bottles from her bathroom cabinet. Martina examined each one carefully, her expression growing increasingly troubled. Eleanor, how long have you been taking this combination? About 8 months. Why? Martina pointed to 2 of the bottles. This muscle relaxant at this dosage would make anyone foggy and disoriented. And this one isn't typically prescribed for your type of injury anymore. It's known to cause memory issues and confusion in long-term use. A cold feeling settled in Eleanor's stomach. Victor manages my medication schedule. He says it's too complicated for me to track while I'm on them. Martina's face hardened. I think it's time you see a different neurologist, one you choose yourself. Dr. Sarah Winters, a neurologist recommended by Martina, reviewed Eleanor's medical history with growing concern. Mrs. Miller, several of these medications are contradicted for your condition, and the dosages are unusually high. She looked up from tablet. Who has been overseeing your prescription regimen? My primary physician, Dr. Hendricks, Eleanor replied. He works closely with my husband. Dr. Winters frowned. I see multiple prescriptions from different specialists, but limited consultation between them. She hesitated. With your permission, I'd like to run some blood work and develop a more appropriate treatment plan. The test results confirmed Dr. Winters' suspicions. Eleanor's blood showed higher levels of certain medications than prescribed, suggesting someone had been increasing her dosages without medical authorization. This combination would cause fatigue, confusion, and memory issues, Dr. Winters explained gently. It may have even been hindering your physical recovery. With the doctor's guidance, Eleanor began carefully tapering off the unnecessary medications. The process was uncomfortable, but within 2 weeks, she noticed significant differences. Her mind felt sharper, her energy improved, and most tellingly, her physical therapy sessions showed measurable progress. "You've advanced more in the past 10 days than in the previous 3 months," Martina noted during a particularly successful session. Meanwhile, Eleanor continued building her case against Victor, now with a clearer mind and renewed purpose. She hired a private investigator recommended by Dr. Winters, who had unfortunately seen similar cases of medical manipulation in her practice. The investigator, Clara Jenkins, was efficient and discreet. Within days, she provided Eleanor with a comprehensive timeline of Victor's relationship with Olivia Rhodes, including evidence they had been involved for over 16 months, predating Eleanor's accident. They met at a development conference in Chicago, Clara explained, showing Eleanor photographs from the event. "According to my sources, she was hired at Miller Development less than a month later." Eleanor stared at the images of Victor and Olivia at a hotel bar, his hand resting possessively on her lower back. The timestamp showed February of last year, 3 months before her accident. "There's something else you should know," Clara continued, hesitation in her voice. "I looked into the inspection records for the construction site where your accident occurred, and the temporary platform that collapsed had been flagged for reinforcement the previous week. The work order was signed off as completed, but there's no record of the actual repairs being done." Eleanor frowned. "That happens sometimes on busy sites. Documentation gets ahead of the actual work." "True," Clara agreed. "But the signature on the completion form? It belongs to Victor Miller." Eleanor's blood ran cold. "Are you suggesting Victor knew the platform was unsafe when I visited the site?" Clara chose her words carefully. "I'm saying the timing is concerning. The accident happened 3 weeks after Miss Rhodes was hired, on a site that Victor had personally signed off as safe, despite documented structural concerns. The implication was almost too monstrous to contemplate. Eleanor had always assumed her fall was a tragic accident. The idea that Victor might have knowingly allowed her to use unsafe equipment was unthinkable. Yet as she reviewed the evidence Clara had gathered, disturbing patterns emerged. After her accident, Victor had taken control of her medical care with surprising efficiency. He had insisted on specific doctors, managed all her medications, and gradually isolated her from colleagues and friends. "It's too much for you right now," he would say whenever she mentioned visiting the office or attending industry events. "Focus on your recovery." Eleanor reached out to Diana again, this time with more specific questions about her attempted return to work 6 months after the accident. "I always thought it was strange," Diana admitted. "You were scheduled to come back part-time. Your office was ready. And then suddenly Victor announced you'd had a setback and needed more time." "I don't remember any setback," Eleanor said slowly. "Victor told me the accessibility accommodations weren't ready yet." Diana's silence spoke volumes. "Eleanor, the accommodations were completed 2 weeks ahead of schedule. I oversaw them myself." The picture becoming clearer was deeply disturbing. Victor hadn't just been unfaithful, he had been systematically undermining Eleanor's recovery and independence while creating a narrative of her being too disabled and mentally unstable to function professionally. With Martina's help, Eleanor connected with a rehabilitation specialist who designed an intensive therapy program away from Victor's watchful eye. 3 times a week, while Victor believed she was attending art therapy sessions, suggested by him and supposedly supervised by a therapist who was actually Martina's cousin, Eleanor was actually working to rebuild her strength and mobility. Progress was slow but steady. As the unnecessary medications left her system, Eleanor found she could stand for longer periods and even take several steps with just a cane. Achievements Victor had repeatedly told her were unlikely given her condition. "He was never at the doctor appointments, was he?" Eleanor asked Martina one day. "The ones where they supposedly told him my prognosis was poor." Martina shook her head. "I reviewed your complete medical records. Several specialists noted good potential for significant recovery with aggressive physical therapy. Therapy Victor repeatedly canceled or rescheduled." Armed with this knowledge, Eleanor contacted Rafael Dominguez, an attorney specializing in elder abuse and financial fraud. Though she wasn't elderly, Rafael explained that many of the same legal protections applied to disabled individuals being exploited by caregivers or family members. "What you're describing is a textbook case of medical gaslighting and financial exploitation," Rafael explained during their confidential meeting. "The medication manipulation alone is potentially criminal. I need to be careful," Eleanor explained. "Victor has significant resources and connections, and he's been documenting my supposed mental instability to use against me." Rafael nodded grimly. "Then we document everything and prepare for the right moment. Most importantly, We ensure your physical safety while we build the case. Safety had become a genuine concern. As Eleanor reduced her medication and became more clear-headed, Victor's behavior grew increasingly controlling. He installed a security system that sent him alerts when exterior doors opened. He began checking her pill bottles to ensure she was compliant with her medication regimen, forcing Eleanor to develop elaborate systems to maintain her deception. Through Clara's investigation, Eleanor discovered something even more alarming. Victor had consulted with a lawyer specializing in conservatorships for mentally incapacitated adults. He's laying groundwork to take legal control of your affairs, Raphael warned when Eleanor shared this information. We need to accelerate our timeline. Eleanor agreed, but insisted they be thorough. I want him exposed completely, not just the affair, but everything. The financial fraud, the medical manipulation, and possibly his role in my accident. The final piece fell into place when Clara located Marcus Jones, a former security guard from the construction site where Eleanor's accident occurred. Initially reluctant to speak, Marcus finally agreed to meet Eleanor at Raphael's office. I wasn't supposed to be there that day, Marcus explained nervously. I switched shifts with another guard. That's why he came to me afterward. He? Eleanor prompted. Your husband. 2 days after your accident. He asked me to delete specific footage from the security server. Marcus couldn't meet Eleanor's eyes. He said it showed you in a private moment. Upset, crying, and he wanted to protect your dignity. Offered me $5,000 cash. Did you delete it? Raphael asked. Marcus nodded. But I'm not completely stupid. I made a copy first. Insurance, you know. Never thought I'd need it. The footage, stored on an old flash drive Marcus had kept hidden, was grainy, but clear enough. It showed Victor on the construction site early on the morning of Eleanor's accident, examining the temporary platform. The timestamp was 6:42 a.m., almost 3 hours before Eleanor's scheduled inspection. More damning was the second clip from the same morning, Victor speaking with the site foreman, pointing to the platform, then handing him an envelope. The foreman nodded, pocketed the envelope, and walked away. No work was done on the platform. Eleanor watched the footage in horrified silence. While it wasn't definitive proof that Victor had intentionally caused her accident, it clearly showed he knew the platform was unsafe and did nothing to prevent her from using it. This crosses into potential criminal territory, Raphael said quietly. Negligence at minimum, attempted manslaughter at worst. Eleanor felt strangely calm as the final pieces aligned. We need copies of everything. Secure copies Victor can't access or destroy. As they developed their strategy, Eleanor learned from Diana that Victor was planning the company's annual gala, traditionally held at a hotel downtown, at their home instead. He says it's to make it easier for you to attend, Diana explained, doubt evident in her voice. Eleanor immediately recognized the opportunity this presented. When exactly is this happening? 3 weeks from Saturday. Victor's being very hands-on with the planning. Through careful observation and strategic questions, Eleanor discovered the true purpose of hosting the gala at their home. Victor planned to announce Olivia as both his new business partner and publicly introduce her as the mother of his child, effectively declaring his new future while Eleanor was present. It's breathtakingly cruel, Martina said when Eleanor shared this discovery. To humiliate you in your own home, in front of colleagues and friends. Eleanor's smile was tight. Actually, it's perfect. He's creating exactly the stage I need. With the gala 3 weeks away, Eleanor moved into high gear, coordinating with her growing team of allies. Raphael prepared legal documents while Clara gathered the final pieces of evidence they needed. Martina intensified Eleanor's physical therapy, focusing on building the stamina she would need for what was to come. We need to be methodical, Eleanor insisted during a strategy session in Raphael's office. Victor is expecting me to either break down or lash out. He's counting on emotional reactions he can use to support his narrative about my mental state. Raphael nodded approvingly. The evidence we've gathered is compelling, but timing and presentation will be crucial. Eleanor had reconnected with her twin sister Elise, from whom she'd grown distant in recent years, a separation she now recognized as part of Victor's systematic isolation tactics. He always said you were too busy with your cybersecurity projects to visit, Eleanor explained during their tearful reunion. Elise's face hardened. I tried to visit many times after your accident. Victor always said you were too tired or in too much pain to see anyone. She squeezed Eleanor's hand. I knew something was wrong when my birthday gifts to you went unacknowledged. We've never missed each other's birthdays. With her background in digital security, Elise proved invaluable to their efforts. She helped Eleanor access Victor's password-protected files, revealing a trove of incriminating information. Emails discussing the offshore accounts where he'd hidden millions in company profits. Correspondence with Olivia dating back to before Eleanor's accident. Communications with doctors instructing them to emphasize Eleanor's limitations rather than potential recovery. Research on medications known to cause cognitive impairment and confusion. Detailed plans for the penthouse being prepared for Olivia, paid for with funds from their charitable foundation. He's been embezzling from our foundation? Eleanor was stunned. The Miller Foundation for Accessible Design had been her passion project, funding ramps, elevators, and other modifications to make public spaces accessible to everyone. According to these records, he's diverted over $2 million in the past year alone, Elise confirmed, scrolling through financial documents. The money supposedly went to accessibility projects that were never completed. The depth of Victor's betrayal seemed bottomless. Beyond the affair and medical manipulation, he had corrupted Eleanor's life's work, using funds meant to help disabled people to instead finance his new life with Olivia. Eleanor insisted on maintaining absolute secrecy as they prepared. She continued taking the placebos Martina had prepared in place of her actual medications, allowing Victor to believe she remained foggy and dependent. She feigned excitement about the upcoming gala, even offering suggestions for the menu and decorations. "I want everything to be perfect," she told Victor with carefully calibrated enthusiasm. "It's been so long since I've been part of a company event." Victor's smile didn't reach his eyes. "That's the spirit, Eleanor. It's important for everyone to see us together as a united front." The irony of his statement wasn't lost on Eleanor. 2 weeks before the gala, Eleanor met with Camila Vega, an investigative journalist known for her exposés on corporate corruption. Raphael had insisted on this connection, arguing that media coverage would provide an additional layer of protection. Once this is public, it becomes much harder for Victor to retaliate or spin the narrative, Raphael explained. Camila was instantly engaged by Eleanor's story. "This goes beyond a personal betrayal," she noted, reviewing the evidence. "The foundation fraud, construction safety violations, potential medical malpractice. It's systematic corruption with real victims. I want to be very clear," Eleanor emphasized. "This isn't about revenge. It's about accountability and ensuring Victor can't do this to anyone else." Camila studied Eleanor carefully. "Your restraint is remarkable, considering what you've endured." Eleanor's smile was tight. "I've had a lot of time to think while sitting in this wheelchair." As the gala approached, Eleanor worked with Elise to ensure their technological preparations were flawless. Hidden cameras were strategically placed throughout the main level of their home. The presentation system Victor planned to use for his company announcement was subtly modified to allow Eleanor to take control when needed. "He won't be able to shut it down remotely," Elise assured her. "Once you initiate the sequence, it will complete regardless of what anyone does." Victor remained oblivious to these preparations, interpreting Eleanor's increased energy as excitement about returning to social life. If he noticed she was taking slightly longer trips around the house in her wheelchair, or occasionally standing to reach something from a shelf, he didn't comment, perhaps assuming his gaslighting had been so effective that she wouldn't dare hope for substantial improvement. 1 week before the gala, Eleanor met with City Building Inspector Maria Gonzalez, who had reviewed the documents regarding safety violations at Victor's construction sites. "These aren't minor oversights," Maria confirmed, her expression grave. "We're talking about systematic disregard for basic safety protocols. If these allegations prove accurate, Miller Development could face significant and possibly criminal charges." Eleanor provided copies of all relevant documents. "I want this handled through proper channels," she insisted. "My personal situation aside, people's lives are at risk." The night before the gala, Eleanor sat in her studio, the one room in their home that remained truly hers. Once filled with architectural models and design plans, it now contained her careful documentation of Victor's betrayal. Every piece of evidence was backed up in multiple secure locations, with copies in Raphael's possession, Elise's encrypted servers, and a safe deposit box accessible only to Eleanor. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martina. "Everything in place for tomorrow. Are you ready?" Eleanor looked at herself in the mirror. The woman who stared back was no longer the broken, confused person Victor had cultivated. Her eyes were clear, her posture straight even while seated in her wheelchair. The unnecessary medications had cleared from her system, and intensive physical therapy had restored more function than Victor believed possible. "Ready?" she texted back, then added, "He has no idea what's coming." That night, Victor was unusually attentive, bringing Eleanor a cup of her favorite tea as she prepared for bed. "Big day tomorrow," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Are you excited to see everyone?" Eleanor took the tea, noting the familiar slight bitterness that suggested he had added her medication directly to the drink, something he had started doing recently when he suspected she might be skipping doses. "Very excited," she replied. pretending to sip while actually letting the liquid fall into the potted plant beside her bed, a trick she had perfected over weeks. It feels like the beginning of something new. Victor's smile widened. That's exactly right. A new chapter. If he noticed the double meaning in their exchange, he gave no indication. As he turned to leave, Eleanor called after him softly. Victor, do you remember what you said to me the day you proposed? About you loved me? He paused, momentarily thrown by the sentimentality of the question. I said many things that day. You said you loved my mind, that I was the smartest person you'd ever met. Eleanor's smile was gentle. I've been thinking about that lately. Victor's expression flickered with something, perhaps a moment of genuine regret, before his mask of attentive husband returned. Get some rest, Eleanor. Tomorrow is an important day. As the door closed behind him, Eleanor whispered to the empty room, Yes, it certainly is. The day of the gala arrived with perfect weather. A crisp autumn evening showed their modernist glass home to its best advantage. Professional decorators had transformed the main floor into an elegant venue with floral arrangements, subtle lighting, and a small stage area where Victor would deliver his announcements. Eleanor spent the morning in careful preparation. She selected a midnight blue gown she had worn to a charity event 3 years earlier, the last major function she had attended before her accident. Victor had always said it was his favorite, though he raised an eyebrow when she requested Agnes help her into it. Are you sure that's appropriate? He asked, glancing at her wheelchair. The styling team brought several options that would be more accommodating. I want to wear something that reminds everyone of who I was, who I am, Eleanor replied with a serene smile. Don't worry, Agnes modified it perfectly. By 6 o'clock, staff were making final preparations as Eleanor positioned herself in the salon adjoining the main reception area. From this vantage point, she could observe without being immediately visible to arriving guests. Victor was in his element, moving confidently through the space, directing caterers and checking lighting. He wore a new tuxedo that Eleanor had never seen. Another small betrayal added to the mountain of larger ones. Are we confirmed for 8:30? She overheard him asking his assistant. Yes, Mr. Miller. The car is picking up Miss Rhodes at 8:15. All board members and key investors have confirmed attendance. Victor nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. Perfect. Make sure Eleanor's wheelchair is positioned near the back once guests arrive. Visible enough for appearance's sake, but not centrally located. The casual cruelty of his instruction confirmed what Eleanor already knew. Tonight was designed to sideline her while Victor claimed his new future. Guests began arriving at 7. Eleanor watched as Victor greeted each one warmly, playing the role of successful businessman and devoted husband. When he eventually wheeled her out to join the reception, his hand rested possessively on her shoulder as he guided her through carefully scripted interactions. Eleanor has been so looking forward to seeing everyone, he would say, patting her hand. Haven't you, dear? Eleanor played her part perfectly, present but subdued, smiling appreciatively as colleagues and business associates told her how well she looked. As Victor had instructed, staff eventually positioned her wheelchair in a corner of the main room, partially obscured by a large floral arrangement. By 8:30, the gala was in full swing. Nearly 200 guests filled their home. Board members, investors, city officials, and prominent members of the architectural community. Eleanor noticed several key figures with whom Victor had been cultivating relationships. Mayor Harrison, Commissioner Lang, and Draymond Jefferson, the venture capitalist whose investment had expanded Miller Development into 3 new states. At precisely 8:40, a sleek black car pulled up outside. Eleanor watched through the window as Victor stepped out to personally greet Olivia, resplendent in a form-fitting gold gown that accentuated her pregnant belly. He kissed her cheek with familiar intimacy, his hand lingering on her waist as he guided her inside. The room subtly quieted as they entered, guests noticing the pregnant newcomer and the proprietary way Victor introduced her to key contacts. Eleanor observed the quick, uncomfortable glances cast in her direction, people connecting the dots and realizing something significant was unfolding. At 9 o'clock, Victor clinked his glass for attention, moving to the small stage area where a projection screen displayed the Miller Development logo. Friends, colleagues, esteemed partners, he began, his voice carrying confidently across the hushed room. Thank you for joining us in our home for this special evening. Eleanor noted his deliberate use of our home, maintaining the facade of their ship even as he prepared to dismantle it publicly. Miller Development has always been about vision, Victor continued, about seeing possibilities where others see only obstacles. Tonight I'm excited to share our newest vision, one that will transform not just our skylines, but our company itself. The screen behind him shifted to renderings of an ambitious new development, the Horizon, a mixed-use community featuring striking modern towers surrounded by green space. The horizon represents our future, Victor declared, expertly building enthusiasm with each practiced phrase. A future that embraces innovation, sustainability, and new leadership. He gestured toward Olivia, inviting her to join him on stage. It's my pleasure to introduce Olivia Rhodes, who joins Miller Development as our new creative director and my partner in bringing the horizon to life. Applause filled the room, though Eleanor noticed many guests looking uncomfortable, their eyes darting between Victor, Olivia, and Eleanor's wheelchair in the corner. Victor placed his arm around Olivia's waist, his smile broadening. Olivia brings fresh perspective and brilliant design sensibility to our team. Her vision for accessible, sustainable communities aligns perfectly with Miller Development's future direction. The irony was staggering. Victor appropriating Eleanor's lifelong commitment to accessibility as a selling point for his new partner. But tonight is about more than business announcements, Victor continued, his voice softening to a tone Eleanor recognized as his most manipulative. It's about honesty and new beginnings. The room grew uncomfortably quiet as guests sensed what was coming. Life takes unexpected turns, Victor said, looking directly at Eleanor for the first time that evening. Sometimes it brings challenges that change our path entirely. Eleanor maintained perfect composure, her face revealing nothing as Victor continued his carefully crafted narrative. Eleanor's accident 3 years ago changed both our lives profoundly, he said, his expression a masterclass in performative compassion. Through her courage, she has shown what it means to adapt to difficult circumstances. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the audience, everyone appreciating the expected platitudes about her bravery. But life also brings unexpected joy, Victor continued, turning to Olivia with undisguised affection. Sometimes, when we least expect it, we're offered a second chance at happiness. With theatrical timing, Victor took Olivia's hand and placed it over her pregnant belly. Olivia and I are expecting a child together in 3 months. A son who represents the future I've always dreamed of. The room erupted in confused reactions, gasps, muttered conversations, and uncomfortable shuffling. All eyes turned to Eleanor, expectantly waiting for the breakdown Victor had anticipated. Instead, Eleanor smiled and began slowly wheeling herself toward the stage. Eleanor, Victor said, warning in his voice as she approached. Perhaps you should. I'd like to say something if I may. Eleanor interrupted, her voice clear and strong. Not the timid tone Victor had grown accustomed to. After such a significant announcement, Victor's face flickered with uncertainty, but refusing her would appear callous in front of so many witnesses. Of course, he tightly, offering her the microphone with obvious reluctance. Eleanor positioned her wheelchair center stage between Victor and Olivia. She took the microphone and surveyed the room, friends, colleagues, people who had known her for years but had accepted Victor's narrative about her decline without question. First, I want to congratulate Victor and Olivia, she began calmly. A child is always a blessing, regardless of the circumstances of its conception. Olivia flushed, looking uncomfortably at Victor, who maintained a rigid smile. I've known about their relationship for some time, Eleanor continued, causing another ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Just as I've known about the penthouse Victor purchased for them in the Archer using funds from our charitable foundation. Victor stepped forward, his hand reaching for the microphone. Eleanor, you're upset. Let's not. I'm not upset, Victor. I'm finally clear-headed. Eleanor turned to address the audience directly. Clear-headed because I've spent the past 2 months weaning myself off the unnecessary medications Victor has been giving me. Medications that kept me confused, weak, and dependent. The room fell completely silent. You see, Victor didn't just betray me with an affair, Eleanor explained, her voice steady. He systematically undermined my recovery from the very beginning. With practiced precision, Eleanor activated the remote control hidden in her hand. The screen behind them switched from the horizon renderings to medical records detailing her prescription regimen. These are my actual medical records, she explained as the documents displayed. And these, the screen split to show a second set of records, are the modified versions Victor provided to my care team, increasing dosages and adding medications known to cause cognitive impairment. Victor's face drained of color. This is exactly what I was concerned about, he said loudly, attempting to regain control. Eleanor has been experiencing paranoid delusions. Her doctors have been monitoring. My doctors? Eleanor interrupted. You mean the specialists you carefully selected and met with privately before my appointments? The ones who received specific instructions about emphasizing my limitations rather than potential recovery. The screen changed again, now showing emails between Victor and various medical professionals, his instructions highlighted in damning detail. Eleanor continued methodically, her voice remaining calm. But the medication manipulation was just one part of a larger plan. Victor needed control of our finances without my involvement. The projection shifted to financial records showing the offshore accounts, property purchases, and foundation fund transfers Victor had concealed. Over the past 2 years, Victor has diverted more than $8 million from our company and charitable foundation, Eleanor explained. Money that was meant to fund accessibility projects but instead financed his new life with Olivia, including the penthouse and the $200,000 Mercedes parked in her garage. Draymond Jefferson stood up from his seat. Victor, is this accurate? Foundation funds used for personal expenses? Before Victor could respond, Eleanor continued her methodical exposure. Perhaps most disturbing was discovering Victor's role in my accident 3 years ago. The screen changed to show the security footage Marcus had provided. Victor examining the unsafe platform, then paying the foreman to ignore it just hours before Eleanor's fall. This footage was deleted from the construction site's security system 2 days after my accident, Eleanor explained. Fortunately, a conscientious security guard made a backup. Victor finally broke, lunging toward Eleanor. Enough. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're confused, delusional. Several guests moved forward to restrain him, shocked by his aggressive movement toward his disabled wife. I'm not confused, Victor, Eleanor replied calmly. Not anymore. Then, in the moment she had been preparing for weeks, Eleanor engaged the brake on her wheelchair, placed her hands on the armrests, and slowly, deliberately stood up. A collective gasp filled the room as Eleanor rose to her full height, steadied her, and took a single step forward, then another. Reaching into the small bag attached to her wheelchair, she removed a folding cane and extended it. Thanks to proper medical care and intensive physical therapy, she said, standing tall before the stunned audience. I've regained significantly more function than Victor wanted anyone to know was possible. Victor's face contorted with rage and disbelief. This is a performance, he sputtered. She can barely. I can walk with assistance, Eleanor corrected him. I can stand for 20 minutes. I can think clearly. All things you worked very hard to prevent, Victor. She turned back to the audience. I'm not sharing this tonight out of vengeance, but accountability. Victor's actions harmed not just me, but everyone who believed in our company's mission and donated to our foundation. Mayor Harrison stepped forward. Mrs. Miller, these are serious allegations. If they're accurate, every document I've shown has been verified, Eleanor confirmed. And I've provided complete copies to the district attorney's office, the state medical board, and the Securities and Exchange Commission. As if on cue, the front door opened to admit several individuals in suits, representatives from law enforcement and regulatory agencies who had been waiting for Eleanor's signal. Mr. Miller, announced a stern-faced woman who identified herself as Special Agent Larson from the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. We need to speak with you regarding allegations of wire fraud, embezzlement, and misappropriation of charitable funds. The gala dissolved into chaos as guests began hurriedly departing. Investors made urgent phone calls, and Victor was escorted to a private room for preliminary questioning. Through it all, Eleanor remained standing, supported by her cane, accepting the stunned congratulations and apologies of colleagues who had believed Victor's narrative about her condition. Olivia, pale and shaken, approached Eleanor after Victor was taken away. I didn't know, she said quietly, about the medications, the accident. He told me your condition was largely psychological, that you refused treatment. Eleanor regarded her calmly. What will you do now? Olivia placed a protective hand over her belly. I don't know. Everything I thought I knew. My issue isn't with you or your child, Eleanor said with genuine compassion. Victor is the architect of his own downfall. As the last guest departed, and investigators continued gathering evidence from Victor's home office, Eleanor finally returned to her wheelchair, not from inability to stand longer, but from the simple fatigue of an emotionally exhausting evening. Martina appeared at her side, having waited outside until the confrontation was complete. You were magnificent, she said, squeezing Eleanor's shoulder. Eleanor looked around the empty room, at the remnants of the gala that was supposed to be her public humiliation, but had instead become Victor's downfall. It's strange, she mused quietly. I spent 3 years feeling trapped in this chair while Victor walked free. Now I can stand, and he's the one whose freedom is in jeopardy. Poetic justice, Martina replied with satisfaction. Eleanor shook her head. Not justice. Not yet. It's a start. 1 month later. Mrs. Miller, thank you for agreeing to this interview, Camila Vega said, adjusting her chair as the camera crew made final lighting adjustments in Eleanor's studio, now transformed into a bright, creative space once again filled with architectural models and design plans. Eleanor sat in a comfortable armchair rather than her wheelchair, though her cane rested visibly against the side table. I think it's important to share this story, she replied. Not for my sake, but for anyone who might be experiencing something similar. Camila nodded. Your case has certainly sparked important conversations about gaslighting, medical manipulation, and financial exploitation within marriages. The interview that followed was comprehensive but dignified. Eleanor recounted the gradual realization of Victor's betrayal, the evidence gathering, and her strategic approach to exposing him. Many people have called your gala confrontation the perfect revenge, Camila noted. How do you respond to that characterization? Eleanor considered the question carefully. It wasn't about revenge. It was about truth and accountability. Victor didn't just betray me personally. He violated his professional obligations, endangered workers through safety violations, and misappropriated charitable funds meant to help disabled people. And yet the personal betrayal was profound, Camila pressed gently. Yes, Eleanor acknowledged. Finding out your spouse has manipulated your medical care to maintain control. It's a violation that's difficult to describe, but focusing solely on the personal aspect minimizes the broader implications. The interview covered the ongoing legal proceedings against Victor, who faced multiple federal charges for wire fraud, embezzlement, and financial crimes. The district attorney was still investigating whether charges related to Eleanor's accident could be supported by the available evidence. Victor maintains his innocence regarding your fall, Camila noted. He claims the security footage shows only routine site inspection and legitimate payment to the foreman. Eleanor nodded. The evidence isn't conclusive on that point, but the pattern of behavior afterward, taking control of my medical care, isolating me from colleagues, manipulating my medication, speaks volumes. After the camera stopped rolling, Camila stayed for tea, curious about Eleanor's next steps. The foundation has been completely restructured, Eleanor explained. We've appointed a new board and implemented strict oversight protocols. Every dollar promised for accessibility projects will be delivered. And Miller Development? Renamed Chen Design Group, Eleanor said with a small smile. We're honoring all existing contracts but shifting focus back to sustainable, accessible architecture rather than luxury developments. Across town, Victor sat in his attorney's office, reviewing the mounting legal challenges he faced. Beyond the criminal charges, Eleanor had filed civil suits for medical manipulation and financial fraud. The SEC investigation had frozen most of his assets, and former business partners were distancing themselves rapidly. The plea deal is your best option, his criminal defense attorney advised. The financial evidence is overwhelming. Victor's fall had been swift and complete. The luxury penthouse intended for Olivia had been reclaimed by the restructured foundation. His reputation was in tatters, former colleagues refusing his calls. Even his parents had expressed their disappointment and shame after watching Camila's investigative report detailing his actions. Olivia had severed ties completely after learning the full extent of his manipulation, cooperating with investigators in exchange for immunity. She had returned to her hometown in Oregon, determined to raise her child away from the scandal Victor had created. Meanwhile, Eleanor focused on rebuilding, not just her life, but her contributions to architecture and accessibility. With Martina's continued support, her physical recovery progressed steadily. Though she still used her wheelchair for longer outings, she could now walk with a cane for substantial periods, and her doctors were increasingly optimistic about continued improvement. The human body is remarkably resilient when given proper support, Dr. Winters told her during a follow-up appointment, as is the human spirit, evidently. 3 months later, the Chen Design Group's first major project under Eleanor's renewed leadership was unveiled to significant industry acclaim. The Phoenix Center, named with deliberate symbolism, was a rehabilitation facility specifically designed for patients recovering from spinal injuries and other mobility-limiting conditions. Every aspect of this building is designed to support recovery while maintaining dignity, Eleanor explained during the press conference. From the therapeutic gardens to the adaptable living spaces, our goal was to create an environment that acknowledges challenges without being defined by them. Martina, who had joined the Phoenix Center as rehabilitation director, stood proudly beside Eleanor at the podium. Their friendship had evolved into a professional partnership that leveraged both women's expertise. The center was funded largely by assets recovered from Victor's fraudulent activities, a fact that gave Eleanor particular satisfaction. What he had intended to use for luxury and deception was now serving those most in need of support and rehabilitation. Eleanor had also reconnected with her sister Elise, who had moved back to San Francisco to be closer. The twins were making up for lost time, rebuilding the close relationship Victor had systematically undermined. He always scheduled something important whenever you planned to visit, Eleanor recalled during one of their weekly dinners. I can't believe I didn't see the pattern. Elise squeezed her hand. Manipulation works because it's subtle. He isolated you gradually, always with seemingly reasonable justifications. With Elisa's encouragement, Eleanor had begun writing a book about her experience, hoping to help others recognize the warning signs of gaslighting and financial exploitation. The drafts were painfully honest, detailing both Victor's tactics and her own gradual surrender of autonomy. "It's the small concessions that are most dangerous," she wrote. "Each one makes the next slightly easier to accept, until one day you find yourself living someone else's version of your life." 6 months later, Victor's legal proceedings concluded with a plea agreement that included significant prison time, financial restitution, and the permanent surrender of his architectural and development licenses. The evidence of his financial crimes had been too overwhelming to contest effectively. Though prosecutors ultimately couldn't prove beyond reasonable doubt that he had deliberately caused Eleanor's accident, the circumstantial evidence and pattern of behavior afterward had been damning enough in the court of public opinion. At Victor's sentencing hearing, Eleanor delivered a victim impact statement that resonated far beyond the courtroom, as it was reported in architectural journals and mainstream media alike. Victor Miller didn't just betray his wife, she stated clearly. He betrayed his profession's ethical standards, his company's mission, and the trust of every person who believed in our commitment to creating spaces that empower rather than limit human potential. She concluded with words that many found unexpectedly compassionate. "I hope that during his incarceration, Mr. Miller will have time to reflect on the difference between success and significance, between building a fortune and building a legacy worthy of respect." After the hearing, reporters asked how she felt about the sentence. "Justice isn't about vengeance," Eleanor replied thoughtfully. "It's about accountability and restoration. The funds Victor stole are being returned to the foundation and will support accessibility projects for years to come. That matters more than the specific length of his sentence." 1 year later, the architectural awards ceremony at Lincoln Center represented Eleanor's full return to professional prominence. As she made her way to the podium, walking slowly but independently with her cane, the standing ovation acknowledged not just the innovative accessible housing project being honored, but her personal journey of resilience. "Architecture has always been about problem solving," she began her acceptance speech, "about recognizing constraints and finding beauty within them, not despite them." Eleanor glanced toward the front row, where Martina and Elise sat beaming with pride, alongside Diana and other colleagues who had helped rebuild Chen Design Group from the ashes of Miller Development. "My experience has deepened my understanding of how profoundly our physical environments affect our sense of capability and independence," she continued. "Good design isn't about accommodating disability. It's about recognizing the full spectrum of human ability and creating spaces where everyone can thrive." The housing project being honored, built on the very site where Victor had planned his luxury development, incorporated universal design principles that made it accessible without appearing institutional. More significantly, it included a training center where disabled architects and designers could develop their skills. "The Eleanor Chen Scholarship for Inclusive Design," she announced during her speech, "will ensure that our profession continues to benefit from diverse perspectives, including those who navigate the world differently because of disability." After the ceremony, Eleanor visited Victor in prison, not for reconciliation but for closure. He had requested the meeting several times and she had finally decided it was time. Victor had aged visibly in the years since his conviction. The confident, charismatic man who had commanded rooms was diminished in his prison uniform, his carefully maintained appearance now marked by premature lines and gray hair. "Thank you for coming," he said as they sat across from each other in the visiting room. "I wasn't sure you would." "Neither was I," Eleanor admitted. An uncomfortable silence stretched between them before Victor spoke again. "I've had a lot of time to think about what I did. To you. To us." Eleanor regarded him steadily. "And I destroyed something valuable," he said slowly. "Not just our marriage, but the partnership we had built, the vision we shared." Eleanor nodded but offered no absolution. "Why did you do it, Victor? Was I not enough after the accident?" Victor seemed genuinely pained by the question. "It wasn't about you not being enough. It was about me not being enough. When you were injured, everyone saw me as the devoted husband caring for his disabled wife. It gave me a role, an identity that brought admiration. But secretly you resented it." Eleanor finished for him. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "And once I started down that path with Olivia, maintaining both lives required more and more deception. The medications gave me control when I felt I was losing it." His honesty, while too late, was at least something. Eleanor stood to leave, noting how Victor's eyes widened slightly at seeing her walk independently. "You look well," he said. "The physical therapy must be working." "It is," Eleanor confirmed, "though it would have worked better years ago, without your interference." As she prepared to depart, Victor asked the question she had anticipated. Can you ever forgive me? Eleanor considered carefully before answering. Forgiveness isn't something you're owed, Victor. It's something I might eventually grant myself. The freedom to move forward, without carrying the weight of what you did. She left the prison feeling lighter, not because of any reconciliation with Victor, but because she had faced him on her own terms, standing on her own strength. That evening, Eleanor sat in the garden of her new home, a thoughtfully designed space that accommodated her varying mobility needs while expressing her aesthetic sensibility. She had sold the glass mansion with its painful memories and designed this more modest but far more personal residence. As twilight gathered, she reviewed plans for Chen Design Group's newest project, a mixed-use development featuring intergenerational housing, workspaces, and recreational areas all designed with universal accessibility principles. Her phone buzzed with a text from Martina. Phoenix Center just admitted its 100th patient. Celebration dinner tomorrow? Eleanor smiled, thinking about how much had changed in a year. Victor had intended it to be her public humiliation and his triumphant new beginning. Instead, it had become the catalyst for her rebirth and his downfall. She still used her wheelchair sometimes, when fatigue or pain required it. She had come to see it not as a symbol of limitation, but as a practical tool that expanded her capabilities. Her disability remained a reality, but no longer defined her identity or constrained her potential. Most importantly, she had reclaimed not just her career and independence, but her voice, using it now to advocate for others who might be vulnerable to manipulation and control. Yes to dinner, she texted Martina back, and yes to celebration. We have much to be grateful for. As darkness fell, Eleanor looked up at the stars becoming visible above her garden. The path forward wasn't perfect or easy, but it was hers to determine. And after everything, that freedom was the sweetest victory of all. Eleanor's story reminds us all that resilience often grows from our deepest wounds, and that true strength sometimes emerges only after we've been broken. Hit the like button if you found Eleanor's journey powerful, and subscribe to our channel for more stories of resilience, justice, and human courage. Don't forget to ring that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. In the comments below, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced gaslighting? What were the subtle signs that something wasn't right? Your insights might help someone else recognize a similar situation.